All right, let's talk about India. You hear about it all the time, right? Economic powerhouse, soaring GDP. We're talking a GDP that's blasted past $4 trillion. The economy is growing faster than a teenager's appetite, projected to hit an eye-watering $14.2 trillion in the not-so-distant future. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? While the national bank account is looking rather plump, you have to ask, who's actually feeling the benefits of this boom? Enter one analyst, a chap named Hardik Joshi, who decided to poke this glittering economic bear with a rather sharp stick. He basically looked at all this wealth and asked, okay, fantastic, but where is it all? Joshi's point, and it's a zinger, is that there's a Grand Canyon-sized gap between the rich elite feasting on this growth and the vast majority of Indians who are, let's say, still waiting for their appetizer. This isn't just academic nitpicking either, it's about the fundamental promise of economic development. The idea is supposed to be that as the country gets richer, everyone gets a bit of a lift. But what if the tide is only rising in the deep end of the pool, where all the yachts are already parked? So, let's get down to brass tacks, or as economists like to say, let's quantify the socioeconomic stratification. According to some rather sobering data, the top 1% of Indians control a staggering 40% of the nation's wealth. Yes, you heard that right, 40%. For 1% of the people. Now let's flip that coin and look at the other side, shall we? The bottom 50% of the Indian population, that's half the country, hundreds of millions of people. What's their share of this enormous economic pie? Brace yourselves. They hold a mere 3%. Half the population gets the crumbs, while a tiny sliver at the top gets almost half the entire cake. This level of disparity has profound implications for the everyday lives of average Indians. It means that while the headlines shout about India's economic miracle, a huge chunk of the population isn't seeing that miracle translate into better schools for their kids, accessible healthcare, or even consistently reliable electricity. The dream of shared prosperity feels very, very distant for many. The concentration of wealth at the very top has been a trend, not a blip. This means that the economic engine, while powerful, is distributing its horsepower in a remarkably uneven way. It's like having a Formula One car where all the power goes to one wheel, causing it to spin wildly while the car itself barely inches forward for most of its passengers. The system, as it currently operates, seems designed to funnel wealth upwards, not spread it outwards. This isn't just about some people having bigger houses or fancier cars, it's about the fundamental promise of economic development. Now here's a fun little thought experiment, though perhaps not so fun if you're one of those billionaires. What if we just, hypothetically, took the top 1% out of the equation for a moment? Imagine they all decided to move to Mars, or perhaps a private island shaped like their own faces, you know, billionaire stuff. How would that change the picture for everyone else in India? Well, according to some analysts, if you were to recalculate India's per capita income without that top percentile's colossal wealth, the numbers would tell a very different story. A significantly less shiny story, in fact. India's per capita income, which is the average income per person, gets a pretty hefty boost from these ultra-wealthy individuals. If you remove that top 1%, the per capita income would drop substantially. So why is this happening? Why, in a country with so much dynamism and potential, is the wealth sticking to the top like superglue to, well, everything? One of the big culprits often pointed to is the nature of India's growth itself. It's been heavily urban-centric. The glittering IT parks, the financial hubs, the manufacturing centers, they're predominantly in and around the big cities. This is where the high-paying jobs are concentrated, where foreign investment tends to flow, and where infrastructure development, while not always perfect, is generally miles ahead of what you'd find in rural areas. Then there are the policy choices, or perhaps policy failures. Critics argue that many reforms have benefited corporations and the already wealthy, with insufficient attention paid to creating a safety net or empowering those at the bottom. And let's not forget the structural issues. Access to quality education and healthcare, which are crucial for social mobility, remains uneven. Section 5. Fields of Frustration, the Rural Reality Check. Let's zoom in on rural India for a moment, because if you want to understand wealth disparity in the country, you absolutely have to look beyond the bustling metropolises. Agriculture, believe it or not, is still a massive part of India's economy, and the primary source of livelihood for a huge chunk of its population, something like half the workforce. The reality for many in rural India is a world away from the $14.2 trillion projections. They face a host of challenges: unpredictable weather patterns made worse by climate change, volatile crop prices, lack of access to credit and modern farming techniques, and often crushing debt. The urban-centric development model we talked about really hits home here. Investment in rural infrastructure, things like roads, irrigation, storage facilities for crops, and reliable electricity, has often been insufficient or poorly implemented. This neglect of the agricultural sector and rural communities isn't just an economic issue, it's a social one too. Section 6. Taxing questions. Is everyone paying their fair share? Spoiler, probably not. Alright, let's talk about something everyone loves: taxes. Okay, maybe not, but they are a crucial part of this whole wealth distribution puzzle. One of the primary ways a government can try to even out the economic playing field is through its tax system. The idea is simple: those who earn more and benefit more from the economy should contribute a proportionally larger share to fund public services that benefit everyone. However, in India, the tax system has often been criticized for not being progressive enough, and in some ways even being regressive. While there are income taxes, there are also numerous loopholes, exemptions, and opportunities for tax avoidance, particularly for corporations and the very wealthy. Furthermore, India relies heavily on indirect taxes, things like goods and services tax, GST, which are levied on consumption. These taxes are easier to collect, but they are inherently regressive. This reliance on indirect taxes, coupled with less than robust taxation of wealth and high incomes, means the government might not be collecting as much as it could from those most able to pay. This, in turn, limits the funds available for public spending on essential services like education, healthcare, and social safety nets, the very things that could help reduce inequality. It's a vicious cycle. Inadequate taxation of the rich leads to underfunded public services, which perpetuates inequality. Section 7. Operations spread the wealth ideas that might actually work. So, we've established that the cake is big, but some people are getting disproportionately huge slices. What can be done? Is it all doom and gloom? Well, not necessarily. There are ideas, actual concrete steps that could be taken to make this growth story a bit more inclusive. One of the most obvious starting points is, you guessed it, making the tax system fairer and more progressive. This means seriously looking at taxing wealth and inheritance more effectively. It means closing those loopholes that allow corporations and high net worth individuals to significantly reduce their tax burden. Beyond taxation, massive investment in rural infrastructure is absolutely critical. We're talking about better roads, reliable irrigation, cold storage facilities to prevent post-harvest losses, and access to digital connectivity. This would empower farmers, improve their productivity, and help them get better prices for their produce. And then there's the need to actively promote labor-intensive industries and small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, providing them with easier access to credit, simplifying regulations, and supporting their integration into larger supply chains could create a multitude of jobs and distribute economic benefits more widely. Section 8. Learning and living investing in people, not just pockets. Okay, so we've talked about taxes and infrastructure, but there's another absolutely crucial piece of this puzzle, and that's investing in people. Specifically, we're talking about education and healthcare. You can build all the fancy roads and factories you want, but if your population isn't healthy and well educated, you're essentially trying to run a high-performance car on low-grade fuel. Think about it. A child born into a poor family with limited access to good schools and decent medical care starts life at a significant disadvantage. Investing in public education, from primary schools to vocational training and higher education, and ensuring it's accessible and of high quality for everyone, regardless of their background, is fundamental. Similarly, universal access to affordable and quality healthcare is non-negotiable. Illness can be a catastrophic financial blow for families, especially those with low incomes. A healthy population is a more productive population. This requires strengthening public health infrastructure, ensuring enough doctors and nurses, and making medicines affordable. Section 9. The big question: is this growth actually progress? So we circle back to where we started. India's economy is growing. The numbers are big. The projections are even bigger. But, as we've seen, if that victory parade is only for a select few, while a vast majority are watching from the sidelines or worse, getting trampled by the procession, Then we have to ask some hard questions. Is this headline-grabbing growth translating into genuine, widespread progress? Or is it just making the rich richer, while the fundamental challenges faced by millions remain largely unaddressed? True progress surely must be measured not just by the height of the skyscrapers or the number of billionaires, but by the well-being of all its citizens, especially the most vulnerable. The challenge for India, and indeed for many countries around the world, is to reconfigure the engine of economic growth so that it pulls everyone along, not just those already in the first-class carriages. Ultimately, the $14.2 trillion growth puzzle isn't just about numbers, it's about the kind of society India wants to be.